Live. Good evening and welcome to the Westborough Advisory Finance Committee meeting of September 9th, 2024 here at Town Hall. This is our fourth meeting of fiscal 2025. Pursuant to Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2021, this meeting will be conducted in person and via remote means in accordance with applicable law. Be better with glasses. This means that members of the public body as well as members of the public may access this meeting in person or via virtual means. In-person attendance will be at the location here, and it's possible that all members of the public body may attend remotely, with in-person attendance consisting of members of the public. This meeting will be accessed via the link in the agenda. When required by law or allowed by the chairs, persons wishing to provide public comment or otherwise participate in the meeting may do so by in-person attendance or by accessing the meeting remotely. Additionally, the meeting will be broadcast live in real time via Verizon Channel 28, Charter Channel 192, or via Westborough TV's online platforms at westboroughTV.org and youtube.com/WestboroughTV. This meeting is being recorded and live streamed by Westborough TV, and we thank them for their help. Okay, let's see who we got. We do have a quorum. We have 7 of us tonight, and maybe some more will join remotely. And so first up is public comment. Mr. Considine, are you here to comment?
Oh, yeah, I have a quick question. Has there been any action on determining which towns to compare?
Joe, could go with name.
Oh, yeah, my name is Joe Considine, 10 Smith Street, and I had come here back 3 months ago or so with a concern that our taxes were going up higher than the 6 adjacent towns, and there was a discussion at a meeting then about determining which towns to compare us against, and I'm just wondering if there's been any progress on that.
I don't know. That would be the town manager and the school superintendent and others who would actually do that comparison. So I haven't heard of a change in those yet,
But
we can ask.
It was a discussion by this finance committee.
Yeah.
But,
Anyway,
okay, so
we
there's
haven't
no
made
action.
any changes to that. In fact, we haven't even talked about that in quite a while. We have been focused on the budget itself and looking at ways of looking at the numbers. But we can follow up and ask again.
All right, thank you.
Yeah. None of you have heard anything about that, have you?
No, I
No.
don't think.
Not in
we
a
should-
while.
I don't think we should let it fall off the radar too far.
Yeah, that's a good question.
Right, I think it's really the select board and the town manager in conjunction with the DPW, the fire department, the police department, and the school department who
Yeah.
set up the dashboard.
Yeah, well, it
We
was.
were sort of, we received it.
Oh, yeah, the very first one was handed down. We did discuss it at a finance team meeting, but I don't know that I haven't heard anything since, to Joe's point. So I can bring it up again, and we'll see where we get. Anyway, we got some time for next March. Okay, thank you, Joe. Our next step is we're very pleased to have our new school superintendent, Allison Borchers. Do I say that right? Borchers?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, very good. And also joining us remotely is the school finance director, Anita Patel. Welcome to you both. The point of tonight was really introduction of Allison to the AFC, since we'll be working on budgets in between now and next town meeting. Give a chance for her to give us a little feel of her style of budget presentation and preparation, and then give you guys some chances to ask some questions or comments that can be followed up probably at a later date, most of them, because it's not real quiz and answer thing. But I know you have a few slides, so
I do.
why don't you start with that, welcome, and
Great.
then we'll go from there.
Sounds terrific. Thank you for the opportunity to be here tonight. Walter told me you'd all be on very good behavior, so I'm looking forward to this very much.
Actually, I said I asked them.
He said yes. Actually, that is a helpful
didn't-
clarifying point.
I know,
So now I know what to expect. So this is really very brief and introductory. I'm just going to try and give you a sense of process-wise what I'm expecting, and it's kind of, I would say, a hybrid of what has happened in the past, but a few things that, just based on my past experience, I'm hoping to bring to the table as well. So first of all, I just wanted to reflect back some core understandings I have from my view so far of this town, but also just experience in education broadly. One, first and foremost, the citizens of Westborough are incredibly proud of their schools. That has come through in every conversation I've had, and I think it's important for me to kind of hold that very close and make sure that I do that pride justice in my role as superintendent and advocating for the schools. That being said, because of that pride and because of the investment, the schools are in a very stable place in terms of both staffing and materials and programming. I'm coming in doing an entry plan. This year is not the year we're looking at big expansion and big innovation. It's a year where we're sort of taking pause and taking stock. So, I'm coming into a very stable situation, and I'm well aware of that fact. I also am aware that the community has really invested substantially in supporting both the operating budget and capital improvements over the last several years. And I know that investment is important and it matters, and it comes with some, trade-offs in the community. So I'm coming in very aware of that as well. I believe, this next one's more of a sort of belief than a core understanding, but that transparency and very careful stewardship are really critical to maintaining public trust in these public institutions. My hope is that the process has been and will continue to be very open so that people know kind of what we're doing and that their dollars are being well invested on the school side. I also know that overall enrollment has decreased slightly. It's been relatively stable. The difference isn't a huge swing, but the high point was in the 2018 school year. It's come down a little bit since then, but not in a dramatic way as we've seen in other communities. So, at the same time, I also am aware that student support needs have increased over the past few years between pandemic recovery, between sort of an uptick in the needs around mental health and supporting kids there, and honestly, just sort of the world in general has created a lot of things kind of coming at us on the school side. And so we are looking to make sure we do right by the kids in the schools right now. I want to talk about the concept of a level services operating budget, which is really, put this way: what would it take to open the doors of the schools next fall and continue to provide the high quality education that the community expects? So again, I'm not talking about introducing a lot of new programming or new structures. It's just, what do we do to kind of keep moving business forward in a sort of respectful and responsible way? I think about things like class sizes that meet our enrollment projections and keep us within guidelines. I think about keeping our programming stable, so we're not losing ground in critical areas. We have contractual obligations to meet around step changes, lane changes, and the COLA increase that's currently in the contract. We are going to be having to go out to bid for a new transportation contract, and I'm going to watch Anita's face while I say those words. Those contracts are not looking good out in the public, so we need to be mindful of that as we budget for next year, for better or worse. We're going to keep an eye on things that are really influenced by inflation and wider things in the climate, like utilities, materials, and supplies. A great example of that, you think of supplies as sort of small things. Digital subscriptions are a big one in the universe of schools, because so far in my experience, I have yet to encounter one that has gone down in price. They seem to go up, and they seem to go up disproportionately to the overall situation of inflation. So that's a tough situation. I do know our director of technology is in there trying to negotiate with companies around those prices. But there simply are some things that we've become reliant on, I think they know it. This is a broad strokes overview of our budget development schedule. The color isn't coming through very well on this particular slide, but I want to show you there are highlighted parts where the school committee has substantial role, and also you all, the AFC here, I can call you for short, has a substantial role in the process. You guys are highlighted in green, which seemed appropriate, and the school committee in red when you look at the real slide. The rest of the process is really internal. It's a lot of conversation that we have internally, and I'll tell you, I've tried to frame that conversation as really thinking carefully about what is the staffing we have and what is the staffing we need. If there are needs that we have that are unmet, are there ways we can reallocate as opposed to adding? And thinking carefully about kind of resources. I really take seriously that notion of being a good steward of the community's resources. So this is kind of a big picture of where we're going. So right now we're in kind of this first phase internal process where this week kind of budget workbooks go out to cost center leaders internally. We have district level planning sessions where we get those groups of people together to sort of prioritize internally so that we're kind of all acting in a unified way moving forward on the budget process. Their internal documents are due into my office with Anita at the end of this month, and then we start really working closely with the school committee around refining and prioritizing what is in the budget. We have kind of enrollment projections coming. Those don't really stabilize for us until after, beginning of October or so, so we'll have a sense of what enrollment looks like for this year and also a little clearer idea of what we hope it looks like next year. And then we've worked in our meetings with your subcommittee group and your advisory group here. And all of it points toward our final budget hearing, which will happen on December 4th. So that's that week right after the Thanksgiving break. Come back. And I'm happy to point out that the final version of our budget should be posted and available for public to look at by the 27th. It's important to me that happens because I'm going to be on an airplane to the West Coast because my dad is getting married. So I got to get that thing done and go watch a wedding. So, okay. Capital needs. I'll take a little pause on this. I think where we are right now, if you were watching the school committee meeting, is they have formed a subcommittee to really look at the most recent capital needs study that was done and do a closer analysis of what those prioritized needs were. There was a sense on the committee they want to sort of really examine those findings carefully, again with an eye to being thoughtful about the fact the community has invested a lot. We know there are other needs in town, and we want to be thoughtful about where our needs fit into the grand scheme of things. I know they're going to come out and advocate for the things that need to be done, but also be thoughtful about timing. So. And really, they're trying to balance this, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, like a roof situation, as we were talking about before, versus a sort of long-term, we could pay a little bit now or pay a lot more later. So it's always a sense of trying to sort of forecast where are we going and how do we do the best to make the most out of the funds that the community is going to put forward to protect those assets that are really community assets. We also want to talk about alternative funding. Are there ways we can get grant funds for smaller projects and things like that? It's tough. Westborough's in a kind of zone where it's hard to get a lot of grant funding for a town like this. You fall into sort of an area, but insofar as we can, we certainly are willing to look at that. A few planning challenges I just want to make you aware of. One is I'm very aware we are going to be entering into the end year of a contract next year. And so thinking ahead a couple years, it's going to be important for us to keep that in mind. So I want to sort of bring a budget forward this year that's very responsible and gives us space to make sure we can settle those collective bargaining contracts thoughtfully for our employees the following year. As you are well aware, the collective bargaining environment out there in the greater universe, but particularly in Massachusetts, has been tough in schools. And so I want to do a good job thinking about our kind of responsibility fiscally so that we don't sort of cut off any opportunity we have to keep our teachers, our best teachers here in the district, if that makes sense. Inflation, something that impacts all of us, but it impacts schools too. We have this shifting landscape with regard to our newcomers, and that really is shifting all the time for us. We thought we had kind of a more stable situation and just recently got some kind of new information over the past couple days. And so I think the school system's done a remarkable job being welcoming, being responsive. I think the town has as well. We want to continue to do that, but it does have an impact in terms of kind of where we go funding-wise. Right now, we've been fortunate that the state has kicked in a per pupil per day kind of amount for students that are coming in through the emergency shelter program. We're hopeful that that program continues because that has been really helpful for us in terms of supporting those kids and their families. And you know, along with that, I think the town is has an interest in affordable housing. They've made some kind of real plans around that, and I think that's fantastic. That's not my that's not my sort of circle of influence, but what I would say, we need to plan, when we plan those things, to also plan for the impact on the school side. And I want to make sure to be really clear-eyed about that so we don't sort of miss anything that could come our direction. We want to be sure that if housing is built that includes opportunities for new students to come in, that we are prepared for that. Along those lines, we are going to be engaging in a kind of more robust enrollment study sometime over the arc of this year that'll give us a little sense of projecting out with more clarity. Last thing on this, I think this is the last one. We've had this really dramatic 2-year uptick statewide in the cost of out-of-district tuition. For a long time, those tuitions stayed very low. That's for students in our school system for whom we have not been able to design a program that meets their needs, and they're going out of district to access private special education schools. The overall increase over the past 2 years in those tuitions was about 20%, and that's a huge, huge swing. Prior to that, it had been about 2%, 3% a year. This district did a nice job with planning and financial management, so it hasn't sort of imploded your budget, but it has in other districts. I don't know what this year is bringing to us. We had hoped that the big upswing a couple years ago meant it was going to sort of flatten back out, but you know, it was over 14% one year and then over 4% the next. So what this year brings, we're not sure. Fortunately, I think you've got really strong programming here. There's been a lot of investment in making sure we build out really strong supportive programs that keep kids in your local schools. And so that's not only sort of the right thing to do for kids and families, it's really very sound financial practice too. So that's all I have for now. So that was my very fast and furious quick introduction to where my brain is at. Anita is here to answer any of the hard questions, and particularly anything you have about history that, you know, I'm sort of slowly getting up to speed about the past of this place, but it's going to take me a little bit. I'm having a hard time just holding on to names in my head at this point, so thank you.
Yes, I guess I'll start with one question just based on your slide. The state per pupil per day fees for
Yes.
shelter, where does that money come in? Your budget doesn't get increased by the town, so how does that money?
Where does it land?
Where does it land,
How
and
is it
how does it
distributed?
help?
Well, I can tell you what the dollar amount is. That it's a grant that was for last year that was allowed to kind of continue to be used into this fiscal year. Anita, I don't know where it lands in terms of, does it go through the town's accounts or ours?
So basically, the grant money is wired up into the town, and then the town sets up a completely separate grant account, and then those monies are deposited into that account, and then we can spend from there directly.
Okay, but it's unbudgeted spent, or it's one of your, I mean, I don't understand how this works then, because you wouldn't, I don't know which you're spending. You're not hiring another teacher because there's 12 more students.
Right.
So what can you spend it on, or how does that mechanism work?
Right. One of the major costs that's associated with this is through kind of McKinney-Vento, which has to do with the laws around homeless students or unhoused students. And the way those laws work, if a student does gain housing during the school year, either becomes unhoused or gains housing during the school year, whichever district they are in at the start of that year, they have the right to access throughout the year. So for us, it could be that we are paying, sharing the cost of transportation for students who, for example, might start the year with us, move to another community, and opt under the McKinney-Vento to finish the year with us. So that's one cost. Another would be increased ELL services. So if we need increased translation services, which has been the case in a number of cases. So it's a lot of things like that. It's sort of additional service and support as well as transportation. Anything else I'm missing on that, Anita?
No, we are correct on that.
Okay.
So, I mean, because we're not as familiar with the workings of the school budgets, but the school committee or the school department has the ability to contract additional people without going through town meeting, I guess, because
Right.
you just get
Well,
one number.
Right, town meeting votes a bottom line number.
So
If
you
we need to
decide
sort
how
of
that
shuffle
number's
things
spent.
around, which is important. We have to be able to be responsive
Sure.
because we don't really have a stable situation. People come, they go. Sometimes, students, a handful of students can come in. One of my favorite all-time stories is about there's a baseball player whose name I'm forgetting who came to the Red Sox, and when that baseball player came from Japan, many of the press corps from Japan all moved into the same school district at the same time. So all of a sudden they needed a ton of translation services. So, we encounter swings like that. Not always that fun, but I think always we have to be nimble and be responsive to the students and families we serve. So.
Okay, so then a follow-up though is the result for the year in all these in the budget or would include the amount of that spent on when it came in through this source somehow.
Do you mean like an end of year report out?
Yeah.
Yes, yeah, that's right. Does it get factored into the EOI? Yeah.
Okay.
It does.
Thank you.
All right. So I'll go around to start over here. You want Adam? You have anything?
Yep.
So,
Jump in. Get
thank you.
close to the microphone now for our friends on Westborough TV.
Me? I'm about to swallow the damn thing. So I'm good. Okay.
Yeah.
Let me know if I need to be a little louder. So you went through a bullet point list of things that were the things you're keeping an eye on.
Yes.
The very top line obviously being teachers, and
Yeah.
that's going to be one of the biggest line for people. I might not have just recognized where in that list goes, but where does administration fall in
Good.
that? Because
Yeah.
that is such a powerful offset in terms or other portion of the funding for
Right.
people.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think staffing, I think of staffing as sort of as a total kind of number of people. And, one thing I'll tell you about schools is they're not getting any simpler to run in my experience. So I'm sure it is true if we were to look back 20, 30 years that costs of sort of administration are ramping up over time. That being said, I think I don't have, we don't foresee any big changes, like I said, programmatically that would require kind of new additions or anything like that on that front.
Okay.
Yeah.
I guess the notion of tracking admin and teachers as two very important items
Yes.
is something that I know I've asked questions about for years in
Yes.
the past, and Amber has done a phenomenal job occasionally going to that place and answering it.
Yes.
But I just sort of struck me that where you were bulleting that out,
Yeah.
the absence of, not accountability, 100%. I don't
Yeah,
mean
yeah.
to say that. I was about to say that. It's terrible. But the absence of identifying that as a key line to track, just
Right.
like transportation, just like
Right.
extracurricular costs and all those things.
Yeah.
To me, it's just something you're going to hear me come back to
Got it.
as we go forward. And I just want to.
No, that's very, very helpful. I think I sort of assume that's sort of built into the staff part of the formula, but I'm always happy to sort of break out what costs look like in terms of those different sectors of staff. So,
Thank you.
no problem.
Set for now. Okay. For now. Josh?
Nope.
Prashant? It's being awfully quiet.
I'm glad you saved me for last. So,
Well, not last. Beth's still here.
oh, okay.
But go ahead. Go ahead.
No,
They said you're not last.
Oh, okay, thank you for your presentation. So I have to say, third year on the finance committee, the school budget is the one I've least understood and tried in this year to understand it better. So
Okay.
we have this year have a nice report end of the year and trying to understand where all the costs were. Sorry. And what struck me most is just the wilds, I won't use adjectives, the swings between line item budgets up and down, and they're just big swings, I guess. And, you know, at the end of the day, you save $525. So it leads me to believe that there's other buckets, as you had perhaps suggested, that you can pull money to take care of some of these things.
Yeah.
And I guess I'm just concerned, and I'll just bring up 2 points, and,
Sure.
and not to get into the weeds,
Yeah.
but in the computer line item, there was an item with a $30,000 budget, and I think it's hardware supplies, and we ended up spending $350,000. So the computer budget is over by $230,000.
Yep.
On tuition, system tuition, which I don't understand, there was a savings of $800,000.
Yep.
So I'm just trying to understand how kind of these big swing decisions get made during the year in terms of how money gets allocated.
Got it. You know, I think, again, those come down to the sort of reality of a bottom line budget. And sometimes if we have an opportunity to do exactly what I talked about, which is if we knew we were going to have to do replacement costs, for example, of technology in this fiscal year, and we came in with good circuit breaker offset in last fiscal year, which is related to special education, it's possible for us to sort of manage our budget so that we can sort of proactively make sure we are getting out in front of an identified very clear need for the next year, because we have to always be mindful of the fact things can swing hard the other way for us. One thing I will assure you, we don't go just sort of spending money on whatever we want to at the end of the year. It's really about kind of clear identified needs that we know are going to be sort of liabilities in the following year. Am I capturing that fairly?
You are perfectly, yes.
Okay. So those specific swings, I'd have to kind of.
Yeah, and I was just using those examples.
But I think it's not unusual to see sort of journaling from different accounts. You know, one thing I will say, you know, Anita's been here 1 year, I'm new too. In an ideal world, we want to sort of stabilize those things more so that what gets represented at the end of the year is sort of where we started. We want to kind of land the plane as close to where we need to be as possible.
And, you know, I think from our standpoint, we're just looking at an overall number. So,
Right.
you know, we just want to be assured that those numbers have all been vetted, and we shouldn't see these, ideally, shouldn't see these big swings.
Absolutely. And, you know, to your first point, I do want to say, you know, I mentioned grant funding as a potential source. You know, I want to be able to sort of look at opportunities and options that are out there. It's not going to be necessarily easy to pick those kinds of things off that way. But, you know, we want to be thoughtful again about the community's resources and coming in with a budget proposal that's both going to do right by our students and is manageable and sort of keeps the public's kind of support in place for us over time.
And my second question is, I understand there are pockets of money that you have available for different items. Say it's, I'm making it up, arts. You know, there's somebody's given a donation for the arts that then you can pull that money to do something. Or maybe a better one is lunch in terms of how that gets funded.
Yeah, we do have revolving accounts that are sort of cash, cash accounts, and as Anita can tell you, those are really, there are hard limits to where we can spend that money. So if something comes in under the school lunch program, we have to kind of keep it in the realm of, you know, benefiting in some way, shape, or form the school lunch program. Same for our after-school care program. What else is on a revolving account? Does athletics have one, Anita?
And athletics has one, yes. Facilities has one as well.
And student activities, I guess. So those
student activities account at each of the 6 schools as well.
So all of those, what comes in needs to kind of go out and benefit that population. So it's not like we can pick up money out of the, out of the lunch account and spend it on textbooks.
Yeah, I guess my question is, how do you decide what you're going to, as a fiscal year comes out, how do you decide how much you're going to spend out of those accounts versus how much you're going to go back to the town for the budget? Lunch would be a good example, I guess.
With the lunch account, the lunch can roll, so those revolvers can roll year to year.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the school lunch account, we get federal and state reimbursements. So every monthly, we will get the reimbursement. It gets deposited right into the revolving account. And then let's just say, for example, if the kitchen needs a new stove or like a new stove or sink, then that replacement would come out of that revolving account. So we can plan to do renovations if we want to for the kitchens, and all of those expenditures would come directly out of the food services account.
Good, thank you.
So I think it's just where's the need is really the answer to that.
And ultimately, what you're doing is under the guidance of the school committee,
Right.
the elected council.
Yeah, exactly.
Beth, you have any?
Yeah, I wanted to say welcome and thank you, and I'm one of the liaisons from the AFC, the school committee, so I look forward to working with you.
Great, thank you. Nice to meet you virtually.
Nice to meet you. Yeah, I spent time with a friend who came down with a sore throat and fever today, so I decided not to do the same to other people.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Beth.
Walter, may I?
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, just not coming back to me. So welcome to the town.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm fairly new to the committee as well. Started recently, so I'm sorry if I don't know everything, and I wanted this opportunity to learn a little bit.
Sure.
So you mentioned one of the variables in the budget and impact drivers is this out of district
Yes.
cost. Could you explain what is the cost? I mean, what are the cost items under this out of district?
Out of district tuition?
What
Yeah.
is, you mentioned that it has increased over 2 years by
Yes.
20%.
Yes.
What were the main drivers for the increase?
It's a complex question. I might not be exactly, I'm going to give it my best shot here. Out-of-district tuitions range pretty dramatically, but they tend to be expensive. They're paid per pupil to the schools where we're sending students who we can't serve within the district. Sometimes they may be $50,000. Sometimes they may be $250,000. It's a very big kind of impact. And in addition to the tuition itself, there's transportation cost. So when I talk about the investment in sort of really working hard to meet the needs of students in the district, that is a very serious job that we take seriously. In terms of where that cost increase came from, I think the reality is those schools, they're independent, they're not connected to a town governance kind of structure. And so unlike public schools where we have to kind of work through you all and get everything to kind of go through town meeting to vote increase, and there are kind of hard limits to your kind of taxation increases, those schools can be much more responsive to inflation, to the labor market demands, things like that. So places where particularly staff salaries were making it hard for them to attract staff, they were able to kind of ratchet things up more quickly. But honestly, they had been keeping their budgets very contained for a long period before that, trying to operate any school on a sort of 2 to 3% increase per year, given what goes on in the universe of education, is very hard to do. So that had been going on for many years, and then they had this sort of spike response just post-COVID.
And it's important to point out the state decides how much they're allowed to raise.
Yes, the state
or
is the
maybe
only.
that's a maximum, but they
Yes.
pretty much raise it by that amount. And so the year you're talking about, the year before this, they said they're allowed to raise it 14%.
Yes.
And that was an attempt to get, be able to hire people, I think, in
Yes.
post-COVID in these very difficult jobs, actually, in most
Yes.
of these schools. And so that is something that isn't set specifically by each school, but
Yeah.
but I don't remember which state group does it, but
It's
remember
the
seeing
OSD is
publication.
their abbreviation. We have 1,000 abbreviations in the schools. Yeah.
I was gonna say, it's very hard for us to avoid, because once we have a student that needs those schools,
Yes.
we have to pay for it.
Yes. Yeah. Well, and it's the right thing to do. I think that, we, in any community that's going to kind of invest in children, if a child has needs, we want to meet those needs. And so I want to be careful never to sort of talk about the needs of
Right.
kids in public in a way that's, or in private, in a way that's dismissive of those or suggests that they're not 100% the right thing to do. It's just hard to plan for.
Yep. Thank you.
Is it? Yeah.
There's something in the comments I couldn't read.
Oh,
You just might want to check it.
John put the comment in earlier. I can look again. All right. Okay. So I had just two kind of questions. One
Sure.
was with the grant programs. We've talked about this a little bit too. Is that if we do bring in a grant to do something that in the future we would like sometimes to know those things in terms of the risk of in the future
Yeah.
we're doing this service, but
Yes.
tax, that may have to go into raise and appropriate,
Yeah,
in year 5 and 6. I remember ESSER funds and this funds and those funds.
Yes.
Eventually the gravy runs out or something like that. But I think it's important in the budget process, thinking more like what you talk about in January and beyond, that when there is, often we've seen a slide that there's a whole pile of the teachers, 100 or 70 or a big number that are paid by the community education or by early kindergarten or by this. And I think that was good because it's really transparent to say this is how they're being paid for. As long as this thing keeps going, we can do that or whatever. But particularly with grants, if it's a one-time grant to replace a sink, then that's not going to have to happen again. But when we do increase staffing or services, then to keep level services, then that may be. And then I think as a general summary from listening to this group for a while now, I think the mystery of the revolving accounts and whatever else there's sort of this mystery to us, and we kind of study this a fair amount. So I think in the interest of transparency, again, in the next 6 months or year or 3 months or whatever, if we can get a better understanding of that as part of your some future presentations of order of magnitude, how big these things are and what they do and how they're used, I think would be interesting from the comments I've heard, I suspect.
Sure.
And it seems like, because there's this sort of thought that there's this mysterious pile of cash, which I doubt is that big or that pervasive, but I think there's so much detail on other things that there are some of these areas that we just don't have the visibility and probably are interested in, right? Yes. I'll check again. Anybody else have other stuff? If not, we look forward to your presentation on September 26th. Is that the right date?
Yeah.
September.
It is.
At the sort of what we call the kickoff. It's it's called the Budget Summit, but that's really the kickoff of the season for real. And then we do a longer one in January, I guess. But I think it's great to have you here more often if we can, maybe during the fall, and keep up to date on what's going on.
Absolutely.
Appreciate your time.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you having me. This is great. You all were very well behaved. Thank you. And I look forward to working together. And if you do have questions ever like that, I think it's really our goal to be as clear and upfront as we can, just with an eye to, we want the community to really trust that we're making good
Right.
use of the resources that are given to us. so.
And that ultimately is our hope, is that
Yeah.
the questions we're asking, other people are wondering about, or, I mean, because we just sort of represent
Of course.
town people. But we do try to, most our conversations with you, to try to go through Beth or Jane Clapp, our
Mhm.
liaisons, so we don't have 30 people emailing you,
Right.
well, 9. Instead, we have 2, but, and then maybe even you guys getting together for some other meeting would be good at some point. We used to do those liaison meetings, but I'll leave that to Beth and Jane to figure out, and you.
Okay.
And
Sounds-
thank you very much, Anita, for your help.
Yeah, and
Thank you.
thank you. I know Anita would have been here in person if she could, but
Right.
she's,
Sooner or later, we'll be back.
we're both very excited about whenever that day will come. So, great. Thank you. Have a good night, all.
Thank
Cheers.
you.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you.
I hope you're not offended if I.
No,
Not at all.
We expect it.
We would too.
Yep.
Yeah, we would too, if Walter didn't make us stay. Oh, wait a minute, I'm Walter. Okay, so the next thing I want to talk about is this, okay. I'm going back here so I can share. Oh. I shared the right one. We'll find out. Okay. So we did have a finance team meeting today. I had the opportunity to talk to Christy and figure out our schedule a little better. So the long and the short of it is we will be having a meeting, not this Thursday, the 12th is still canceled, but we will have a meeting on Thursday the 19th. And that meeting, Christy and John will come, and we'll cover the warrant articles that are appropriate for them, and also maybe be able to dig into a little bit of the appropriation report or other issues on the future budget with them on Thursday the 19th. So that means on the 16th, we'll still have police chief to cover the one article, on the transfer, and the planning department a week from Monday. And I did want to point out specifically that tomorrow night, the 10th, and you don't have to watch it live, but you can watch it between now and when we do talk about that article, at the select board meeting, the municipal consultant that we use will for the finance stuff will be there to talk about that article, which is talking about the new law, which lets them invest slightly, well, I would call it better, but different than it is today. And that person being a consultant won't be attending our meeting. So it's worth our listening to that at some point on Westborough TV. So you can hear that person directly, and then John and Christy can sort of answer the questions other than that. But I think that's reasonably straightforward. So that's tomorrow night, on the 10th. I spoke to her about the article that we discussed about removing the words eminent domain, and she thought that was possible. So there is no, it is sort of boilerplate, and you know, so I believe that may be able to be done. So we'll see. So we'll keep looking to see whether that happens. So we won't vote on that one at this point. In fact, we don't have any. We won't vote on it anymore at the moment. Other news is, which I'm sure Rod was probably aware of, but there may or may not be an article for the golf building at this fall town meeting for some amount. They're still working with bond counsel and things on, because we're talking about potentially a split with some money coming from more private sector and some money coming from the golf company, what do they call it, the revolving fund for golf, basically. because a percentage of it is for the golf building and the other stuff coming, so it's all still being worked on. So we may get that slipped in nearer to the end. Certainly not this week on that. But the other articles seem to be getting the numbers together, so I think when they visit on the 19th, I think they'll have the numbers for several of the other ones that are blank now. So we should be able to get through those, ahead of time, leaving room for the end, because even the community center isn't figured out what they're gonna come to this town meeting asking for, whether it's just design, whether it's design and construction, or design and some construction, or, so I have a feeling that means that stuff gets settled kind of closer to October 1st, or later, if, depending how you write the article. So we need to leave some bandwidth near the end is all I'm saying. So I'm going to continue to push us to try and finish the ones we can up front that we can done, unless there's some reason not to. Are there any other liaison reports or anything? Prashant?
We just came back.
Microphone.
Sorry. So DPW came back with some extra narrative on exactly what sort of vehicle that the vendor was engaged for, and I just so essentially it was a wear and tear, a proactive way of fixing the wear and tear of the vehicle that they had, which is gonna be used in the upcoming snow season. So I just thank them for the fact that they're pretty proactive about it.
Very good. Anything from your building committee this
No,
week?
building committee will meet on Thursday.
Ah,
so.
Thursday, okay. And library meeting is tomorrow, so I don't have anything new since the last meeting either. Anybody else? No, you don't do capital this time of year, I don't think.
Not yet.
Yeah, very good. We have no additional minutes, and are there other agenda items we'd like to do? I think Joe brought up a good point about, I completely forgot about it. I think it's because it was summer. Summer happened in between when we first talked about it, and I think that was last spring when he brought it up. But
I'm not 100% sure, but I think the finance committee meeting that you missed, that I attended, it was also
finance team.
finance team. It was also discussed,
Okay.
but I might be conflating that with our conversation here. Nothing was decided. No changes
Yeah.
were made, so materially
Yeah.
there was no update. But
So
I don't think it's fallen off Christie's list. Is my
right.
point.
I think it's on a list. I suspect her list is somewhat huge with
Yeah.
with this building and other stuff going on. But I will see where that is. I don't think it doesn't matter hugely for this town meeting, because other than some chart she might put up somewhere, it matters more for next spring, I think, because that's where the real money's spent, I think. But it's good. I don't know. Keep it on the list. I think we got a little more excited about starting to work on the budget versus comparison to other towns, because in the end, we have to be comfortable with our budget ourselves in its own right. So I think getting that going and starting a conversation with the schools and with the town on thinking a little differently this year, it was probably more important than the list, but doesn't prevent us from keeping that on the list. Okay. Anybody have anything else?
This is a learning question. I brought up last time about the warrant articles that hadn't been closed out, and I
Mhm.
tried to do a little more research, and I guess I really don't understand the numbers that are in the report that we get. Is that the money that's left over in those accounts at the beginning of the year? And what was
So-
spent against that account? In
Uh,
other words, we get a list. Here's
Of all the warrant
warrants.
articles, it
And then
usually
there's
says what
the-
the original article is and what's been spent and how much is left.
Original appropriation.
That's what the town voted for. And then for ones that are spent, it'll show how much is spent and then how much is left.
So there's one here, and this is why I question it. There's
Yeah.
one here for $6, there's one here for $91,
Of
one here.
left or original appropriation?
original appropriation.
Sounds like something might be wrong there.
Sounds like,
I did talk to,
maybe John can explain it. when he
yes,
comes in.
and that would be part of what we can talk about when they're here. They did not do the exercise this year that they have in the past of, John can take those off the list if the, for lack of a better word, department head agrees that they're done. It doesn't take town meeting vote to remove one of these articles. I think it only takes town meeting vote to reappropriate it, which certain people want to do. And we talked a little bit about it today, about the importance of like it really being the same thing and not, not moving from certain things. And so an example is the library building committee, they came for the very first thing to just get the beginning of the repair design done. There's some leftover money there from that then gets used in the second phase, which is getting the solid design. It's really the same thing. It's design work, and it's better to have leftover money
Yeah.
than have to
Yep.
ask fully. But it wouldn't make sense to apply that for design work at the community center, because that's a different,
Right.
So that makes sense.
Right.
So I think because of all the turnover in the finance department, they did not get to the exercise, which I think is pretty important. I think he does get pushback from people, and we talked about, well, at some point, if there's a lot of pushback, our committee could say, well, we're not gonna support your new article till you close out some of these other articles or something. But we ought to see what it is. And then some of the articles are school articles, which are completely out of John's purview to
Mhm.
make any choices or decisions on when they close. But I think they're more aware of the fact that we don't want them, doing this project with that project's money too now. So anyway, long story short, I think there is hope for moving forward more on trying to clean those up. But in some cases, if it's very specific to the same kind of stuff, they tend to leave it there because they don't want to come back for some of these smaller numbers. It seems odd to me that we ever would have appropriated $6.
Yeah, something doesn't seem, and
Like-
I honestly,
And they saw that, yeah. So.
I had trouble lining up the articles based on what I see here, so maybe John can help explain it, or I can sit
Yeah.
down with him and have him explain it to me. Probably a better idea.
Hope so. Yeah, so anyway, that's why I thought it was good to have those guys come, and the Thursday date, well, not best for people here's opinion, but that was the date that really worked for them, so went with it, because the Monday wasn't gonna work. Okay, it's all good. So our next meeting is not Thursday, it's next Monday, and we will be here with police and planning. And so you can find out what the last 20-something pages of our warrant are all about at the next one, and learn about that. And with that, how about a motion to adjourn?
Shafford, motion to adjourn.
Bradley, second.
We are hybrid, so we need to start with, who's first these
Oh, wait.
days? Prashant.
Ahuja, yes.
Lumberg, yes.
Bradley, yes.
Brant, yes.
Chibala, yes.
Leslie, yes.
McMahon, yes.
Shafford, yes.
Okay, we are adjourned. Thank you, Westborough TV. See you.